The Keeping Families Together Act, which was passed back in 2023, puts a very, very strong emphasis on keeping kids in homes, even where there's this extreme drug use, and not separating families, which nobody's going to argue that you want to see families separated, but there is a point at which you have to look at things and say, hey, this is clearly not a safe situation.
Well, the threshold for what was dangerous to a child was what the proposed legislation was trying to amend.
Yes.
Take a more realistic and modern look at, because threats to kids have become much more dangerous given fentanyl's intrusion into our culture.
And as you pointed out in your amendment that you were trying to get passed, and ultimately it didn't get passed, unfortunately, but that you were trying to get passed, they now have numbers. So, right, since 2023, a couple years ago, they now have numbers. There has been an increase in child-related incidents and deaths as a result of this passing. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. In the last 2 years, we've had over 100 critical incidents. That's child fatalities and near fatalities. And just to put that into perspective, before the Keeping Families Together Act, we would maybe have like less than a handful in the entire state for a year. So the numbers are dramatic. They're huge. And, if you want to do a state by state comparison, they had like 20 critical incidents in Oregon, so it's a vast difference. You could direct it right back to the Keeping Families Together Act, because it's a bill, it's a system designed to escalate risk until the child is dead. And a lot of times these caseworkers, these social workers, who, by the way, didn't sign up for this job to get rich. They care about families. They care about kids. They want to be able to do their jobs, but they can't.
Yeah.
Their hands are tied by the law. But when you hear someone like the DCYF Secretary Tana Sen say, like she did in the news yesterday, that it's less traumatic to keep those kids in those situations where there's parents who are abusing hard drugs like fentanyl and meth, and could lead and is leading to their deaths, that it's less traumatic to keep them there. Well, what is actually more traumatic is when a social worker has to come not 10, 20, 30, but upwards of 70 times to these homes, endanger themselves because there's fentanyl everywhere, but also try to keep this kid alive. And a lot of them have, I've talked to a lot of these social workers, and in tears, they will say, like, I just know when I go back to that home, there's nothing I can do, and that child might be dead the next day. And that's a tragic situation to be in for them. But also, I will just note that if the child is dead, there is no chance at family reunification. Mm. There is no chance of keeping the family together if the child is dead. And
in this case,
I tried everything in this last session. Literally everything to fix this. And on my closest attempt, I failed by 3 votes out of 98. So I'm heartbroken because of it. I'll never give up, because a state that can't protect its kids has lost the moral authority to do everything else.
Yeah.
Travis, when these opposing politicians say that it's more traumatic to separate a family than to keep a child in a dangerous, what are they citing to validate that?
Yeah, there's something called an ACE, right? And think of it like a score. An ACE is like a traumatic experience, right? So in that child welfare world, they're looking at ACEs, well, removing a child from their biological parents. And I will just say that if you can prevent putting a child into the system, so to speak, and if you can make sure that the biological family stays together, sometimes it's for the best, but only when it's safe to do so. Right. And that is the critical measure in which is not being done right now. Right now, it's we're going to keep the family together at any cost. Right. And the traumatic experience of removal from biological parents may be like one ACE. But every time a social worker has to visit and try to protect that child, that is another additional ACE. So we're trading 70 ACEs for one, is kind of how the math works out. And that doesn't make any sense to me.
Can I give the audience just a little background on this too? There's a couple parts of the story that just jumped out at me that I don't think I certainly was unaware of how blatant. I just assumed, like, let's say somebody is suspected of, they have a DCYF case and they suspect that this person is using drugs. I assume that if the social worker sees these things, or if there's a urine test or something and it's proven that they have drugs in their system, something like fentanyl, you would then say, okay, well, clearly that's not a safe environment for this kid, but that's not the case. And in this case, this woman who's been charged, whose name is Safara Ratoya Red, she's 33 years old. She initially tells, this is in the King County Superior Court charging documents, but she initially tells investigators that she was attacked by a man who forced a white substance that tasted like fentanyl into her mouth when she was at a light rail station. And she says she thinks her infant may have been exposed as well. Then they investigate that and they find that they're not believing that story's true, because they have video and they show that she's actually going towards a bus and she's, there's no evidence that this happened, as she says. She calls 911 at some point and they try to give her, in this call about, I think my infant may have gotten some as well when I was trying to make him a bottle. The 911 operator then attempts to help her give CPR because the child is having issues. And according to the 911 tape, she's not even able to follow along with that because of whatever state she's in. And she's just kind of like in and out of, not consciousness, but in and out of the conversation, kind of apologizing, saying, I'm sorry. Police then arrive at her apartment. They find this child. This is dark and horrible, but they find the child that's already been deceased, cold, on the couch. And the arrest report says there's boxes of Narcan cartridges near the child's body, presumably ones that she got possibly when she gave birth to the child, because when she was at the hospital and the nurses alerted local officials, right, that she had been suspected of drug use, she then goes home. They give these lock boxes with Narcan and all this stuff. These people are going to use, and still you're sending them back out with the most precious thing in the world, which is these kids. How can you expect somebody in the middle of a drug-induced state to also be a parent? I don't understand the reasoning there. It doesn't make any sense to me. And
you can't.
Help me make sense of it, because it's driving me crazy.
You can't, because, and I've said this before and I won't apologize for it, but the only thing someone who is in the throes of a deep fentanyl addiction cares about is getting the next hit. They love the drugs more than they love caring for their kids. And as harsh as that sounds, it is the truth. Look at the streets of Seattle and look at someone who has just smoked fentanyl and their flesh coming off of their skin and stooped over and overdosing and throwing up on themselves. If you can't even care, feed, bathe, nurture yourself, you can't do that for a child. Yeah. And the answer from the state of Washington is, we're going to provide services. Well, that's a funny term, services, but what exactly does services mean? Well, services mean we're going to give you a lockbox so that after you're done smoking your fentanyl, hopefully you remember to put the fentanyl, an illegal substance, back into the lockbox with all of the paraphernalia, the foils, the straws, the whatever else it may be.
To protect your kids.
That's ridiculous to me. No one, and that never works. Other things like safe sleep training. We're going to train you to not roll over on your baby and suffocate it while you're high on fentanyl. I mean, that stuff does not work. And that's exactly what happened in this case, too. They were receiving services, a lockbox, and safe sleep training. And look how that turned out. The child is dead. And we have dead babies, just scores and scores of dead babies because of this. And it's absolutely insane. It is nuts. It is not a left versus right issue. This is a right versus wrong issue. And that's why you had a lot of Democrats coming over to my side to support fixing it. But unfortunately, we just didn't have quite enough. We were short 3. And it might be traumatic to remove a child from their biological parents, but you know what's more traumatic? Being dead. Yeah. That's more traumatic, Travis, than being removed.
When can we try again to make this change in the law? How soon again can this proposed change be put forth by you? And And what more can we tell the legislators that are opposed to this? What's it going to take?
And Spike, that's the most heartbreaking, other than the child being dead, that's the second most heartbreaking part about all of this, is that you get a legislative session to fix it. And if you gavel out and the session is over, then you have to wait till next January when the next session begins to try to fix it again, barring some kind of special session, which the governor will never call for something like this. So now we get to sit here and watch with no ability to fix it and watch the child fatalities rack up till next January. And I'm running out of, ideas other than potentially having more balance in Olympia, because, I've had bipartisan bills. I even eighth ordered, which is a rare procedural motion, to rip dead bills from committee straight to the House floor for a vote. I took 2 Republican bills tackling the issue. And I even eighth ordered a Democrat bill and a Representative Alicia Rule's bill, which would also have helped fix the situation to the floor. And they unanimously, the Democrats voted those things down.
Insane.
And even Alicia Rule voted no on her own bill. And a lot of these are bipartisan. All 3 were bipartisan bills. And then we tried on the budget with the budget amendment to implement my bill and get more funding for caseworkers to help tackle the crisis. And that's what failed by 3 votes. And so, I feel like I'm kind of circling the wagons a little bit to try to figure out what do I got to do this interim to kind of sell this. But in my talks with Democrat leadership, they just don't even see the same thing that we see. They look at the data and they say, hey, it's getting better. But even if you believed their data, it would still be one of the worst in the country. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's total confirmation bias. They built the law, so then they feel like the law is working despite all of the evidence saying to the contrary.
Is the legislative change the only way to change the threshold of what is a dangerous environment? That's the only possibility? There's no medical or procedural?
You have to change the law, Spike, because the law says imminent physical harm. I mean, unless the child is smoking fentanyl themselves, you almost can't remove them from the situation.
What's tragic about in this case specifically with this child? This is horrible, but one of the details was, so they went back and they did an after action fatality review, and they found that this kid had, at 11 months old, because of prior exposure to fentanyl, had already, his sweet little body of an 11-month-old baby was already trying to struggle to figure out how to process the fentanyl that they were already being exposed to. It wasn't just this one instance. It was prior instances. And to think about, that kid has no chance. I mean, that kid has no chance. And you have family members who came forward and tried to get to CPS and say, CPS, she is not clean. She's not following the safety plan. Something bad is going to happen. And the caseworkers ended their case with this woman in June of 2024. 6 months later, the child was dead. I just don't understand. All these pieces are not adding up. And I don't know what else it's going to take other than just voting out these people who are, in my honest opinion, they're too big of cowards to do the right thing. Otherwise, they would do the right thing. And I think the only way is to just elect people who are willing. It's just a question. You ask every lawmaker who comes on the show, would you be willing to make changes to this? Because clearly it's leading to more child deaths. And if the answer is no, then that's a person that I just can't take seriously. And if it's a yes, then I don't care what side of the aisle they're on. If you're not willing to protect kids, what are you even doing there? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think it's okay for a 9-year-old to be in a tent with fentanyl and prostitution and rats and bottles of urine and not going to school every day and then being exposed to those hard drugs? I think most normal people would say, hell no, that's not okay. But yet you have a majority of legislators in Olympia who are saying, yes, it is. And that's nuts to me. I think that to be able to fix it, you got to fix that imminent physical harm standard, because imminent is a measure of time and no one has a crystal ball to tell when a child is going to die. And it gets a little bit more complicated, but you got to be able to go into a dependency court and prove in court that this is a danger. And with that in the law, the judges won't do it. They have to follow the law. So that's why we need that law change. If it was as easy as I wish it were, which is go to DCYF and say, do a better job and start removing these kids.
Yeah, but their hands are tied too.
Already doing it, right?
Well, I can't thank you enough for keeping your fire going for this issue. I imagine it must be frustrating and heartbreaking, but the fact that you are committed to not letting this go until laws are changed and kids are protected, I can't tell you how much we appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll never